Greetings, great people, great Abyssinian people. We are going here, and a Kabu from Iriefm, I go tell you, is a very shocking and disturbing act committed by the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Portia Simpson-Miller. Now, everybody knows it's Rasta who keep the memory of Africa alive in Jamaica. Everybody know that. Everybody also knows it's Rasta who always been calling for repatriation to Africa, and in the meantime have always requested a seat at the table of the African Union to discuss African unity and repatriation. Well, after years of Rasta in Jamaica repeatedly asking for a seat, the African Union say, yes, we are give a seat. Them give the seat to the Portia Simpson government of Jamaica in January 2014, expecting that the government would then appoint a suitable individual who would represent the concerns of the application. Somebody who would address the reason why the seat was requested in the first place. Somebody who would deal with African unity and repatriation. Well, we ancestors them must have turned in at them grave at the Prime Minister's appointment. Sister Kabu from Iriefm, I go give you the details of this most unscrupulous act and how you can sign the petition which I go then present to the Prime Minister, Portia Simpson. Hear this.
You're inside of the Africa Forum, running African, and I think we do have to play a little bit more from Amilcar Cabral. Let's do that.
Speak truth to the people. To identify the enemy is to free the mind. Free the mind of the people. Speak to the mind of the people. Speak truth.
The bottom line is that, as Amilcar Cabral says, when your house is burning, it is no use beating the tom-toms. One thing we know, Africa is burning. Africa is burning, and so the question is it enough to just talk about it? The issues that are confronting us, African people wherever we are, on the continent of Africa, in the African diaspora, is it enough to just talk about it, these issues? Or is it time, as Amilcar Cabral argues, to realize that we're not going to eliminate oppression and injustice, neocolonialism and new slavery, imperialism and land grabbing by shouting against it? That for us, the best or worst shout against our continued oppression by our various governments, multinational corporations, foreign agencies and local agencies and institutions, that our best or worst shout is to fight back. The bottom line is that we must fight back. We must fight back against genetically modified foods and products flooding our farms, markets, and shelves. We must fight back against the incursion of Monsanto into Africa and the Caribbean, and against the individuals who represent Monsanto. We must fight back against a government who would appoint an ambassador whose major client list includes Monsanto to represent Jamaica at the African Union. We must fight back against a system that is locking us out of our beaches and denying us access to our coastlines. We must fight back against a regime that is presiding over the biggest non-reversible corporatization or land grab of our land and agriculture since slavery. We must fight back against this. We must fight back against the militarization of the African continent and the Caribbean waters by the United States through Africom and the CBSI. We must fight back against Africom. We must fight back against the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. The bottom line is that Africa and the African diaspora, including Jamaica, are right now, at this minute, as we speak, being confronted with one of the most intense thrusts ever to open up the continent like a prostitute and its diaspora to genetically engineering foods and products. African countries such as Zambia, Senegal, and Nigeria in particular, which had previously resisted attempts from Monsanto and Syngenta to flood the continent with genetically engineering seeds and products, have relented and are now opening up their borders to GMOs, from cassava to maize and everything in between. Nigeria is an interesting case because, as I told you just about 4 weeks ago, right here in this forum, Goodworks International, whose co-executives are Jamaica's ambassador to the Afrikan Union, Ambassador Carlton Masters, and former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson. I told you that Goodworks International have as their clients Monsanto and Nigeria. I told you then to watch Nigeria to see the extent to which Nigeria would be forced to open up to genetically engineered foods and crops. Well, guess what? Is it a coincidence that Nigeria is one of the African countries where we are now seeing this renewed and intense push for genetically engineered foods and products, and that this push is being spearheaded by ministers of government in Nigeria and other highly placed officials in Nigeria? In fact, Nigeria has just announced that it sees nothing wrong with genetically engineered foods and products, and are now on a massive campaign in Nigeria to introduce GMOs into that country. Cassava. Genetically engineered cassava have been approved in Nigeria, cultivated in Nigeria, embedded in Nigeria. We have some questions to ask ourselves about cassava here in Jamaica, because round about the same time that Nigeria was saying yes to cassava, genetically engineered cassava, we were being told here in Jamaica that we must grow more cassava, and we didn't stop to check to see where the cassava was coming from, or whether or not Monsanto was behind the cassava. We must ask ourselves questions, or we'll find that the food going in the ground is can't plant again once we eat one time. The bottom line is that Nigeria does not have a biosafety law, and therefore does not have the mechanisms in place to monitor and control the influx of genetically engineering foods into the country. Neither does Senegal. And Zambia, as we know, was pressured into accepting GMOs a few years back, or else. But what is driving this new push for genetically engineered crops and foods in Africa and the African diaspora, especially when the research has shown that genetically engineered crops do not give more yield than natural crops, and that it is cheaper to fund the transportation of natural food within and across Africa, among African countries, than to ship ton loads of GMOs into Africa? What is behind this push? Who is behind this push? The rate at which vast acres of land are being grabbed by Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow AgroSciences, BASF, Pioneer H-Bread International, and Bayer Crop Science, they are all genetic engineering organizations, the Big Six they are called. The rate at which they are grabbing land in Africa is unprecedented. The bottom line is that all the civil rights activists and activists for social justice in Nigeria and across the continent of Africa agree that there are very powerful forces behind the push towards genetically engineered foods and products into Africa. In fighting back, who do we fight back against? Sergeant for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah challenges us to define and know and name our enemies. I don't have the answers, I just have questions. I'm seeking for the answers. I'm seeking truth. What is the relationship between the unholy haste to introduce GMOs into Nigeria and the representation by Goodworks International of both Nigeria and the company with the largest market share of genetically engineered crops in the world, Monsanto? What is the relationship? To what extent is this relationship made into an even sweeter deal by the appointment of one half of Goodworks International, Ambassador Carlton Masters, as Jamaica's representative to the African Union? I don't have the answers. I only have questions. And sometimes it's not the answers that are given that is a problem. It's the questions we ask. It's the questions. The questions are always more important than the answers. Remember that. One of the first rules of journalism. Simple. But it's not the answers that matter. It's the questions we ask. Because if we miss the questions, we'll never ever get the answers. So those questions I cannot answer as yet, but I am concerned that even the very appearance of a conflict of interest in this matter is too much to sit back and do nothing, as I am concerned that we saw the same unholy haste to push cassava into the farming habits of small-scale farmers in Jamaica who were doing quite well with their yams and sweet potatoes, which we understand will now be imported into the country. Genetically engineered, we do not know. Another question we must ask. And yes, doing quite well with cassavas too, natural cassavas. The bottom line is that we do not know the extent to which genetically engineered foods have entered the food chain here in Jamaica. We certainly do not know if our cassava and sweet potatoes have been compromised. Monsanto's major objective is to flood the continent of Africa and its diaspora, the world for that matter, with genetically engineering food and products so that they can control the food industry. The scary part of that is that once genetically engineering organisms, seeds and other products are unleashed into any country, they cannot be recalled. Doesn't work that way. So this is what we call food terrorism. Monsanto, Syngenta and the rest of them are guilty of food terrorism. Who in Jamaica? Which organization is responsible for monitoring genetically engineering food at our borders? What are the laws governing GMOs in Jamaica? Does Jamaica have a biosafety policy? And if so, how is it being implemented and enforced? Can Jamaica actually say no to Monsanto when Monsanto is a client of Goodworks International, one half of Goodworks International being our ambassador to the African Union, and the other half being our beloved former Prime Minister? Can Jamaica say no to food terrorism from Monsanto? We must fight back. This is not the time for singing and dancing and beating the drums. It is not the time for the tom-toms, unless it's the sound of a communication drum beating the cry of war and calling the soldiers to order. In fighting back, we demand of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Portia Simpson-Miller, that she declares Whose interests does Ambassador Carlton Masters represent at the African Union? Is it Monsanto, Nigeria, Chevron, Coca-Cola, the people of Jamaica? We call on the Prime Minister to declare that with Goodworks International representing energy companies such as Mirant, who was recently in Jamaica, Coca-Cola and Monsanto, how are we to respond to the triple threat of land grabbing for natural resources for energy by international companies? The fight to label genetically modified foods and genetically modified foods coming into Jamaica, which are now being pushed on the African continent. We call on the Prime Minister to declare, how can we, Africa and the Caribbean, Jamaica in particular, protect against big pharma and their efforts to push pharmaceuticals on developing countries, pharmaceuticals tied to aid and trade, when our representative at the African Union represents Sumitomo Chemicals, producers of pharmaceuticals and vast amount of chemicals? How are we to fight back? With Ambassador Carlton Masters as a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, we call on the Prime Minister to declare, why should we expect that he will at any time put Jamaica's and Africa's interest before that of a Council on Foreign Relations, before that of Africom and the United States of America, where he lives and whose interest he now represents on the Illuminati-controlled CFR. The bottom line is that the time for tom-toms is over. The time for beating drums and sounding a bangs is long gone. If we do not act now, if we do not fight back now, we will be presiding over the new enslavement of 4 or 5 generations to come. Frederick Douglass tells us, power does not concede without a demand, and demands must be targeted, matched by ultimatums and action. I have started a petition which is now circulating on the social media and will soon be in every nook and cranny of Jamaica and Africa. And I want you who are listening, who are just as indignant as I am, who are mad and sick and tired of being mad, to visit my Facebook page, Kabu Keru Williams, and the Running African page, Running African, the Iriefm forum, and sign the petition if you haven't done so. The petition is calling on the Prime Minister of Jamaica to declare the mandate of the representative of Jamaica to the African Union. This is a call to action. What can you do? And sometimes we ask ourselves that questions and we say, what can we do? And when the program is finished or we've finished our conversation, we say, what can we do? Well, we can start by signing this petition. It's the first place to start. And we just need enough signatures to get a response on this. So sign the petition and let us take it one step further. Prime Minister of Jamaica, declare the mandate of the representative, Jamaica's representative to the African Union. Is there a conflict of interest? Talk to the people. This is a call to action. What can you do? Start by signing the petition. But make sure that you ask the questions yourselves, in your spaces, in the political spaces, in the tribal spaces, in Gordon House, in your churches. Claim no easy victories. That's the bottom line.
Gonna fight against creation.
easy victories. This is how we say goodbye for today. African without apology, how we say goodbye for today. African without apology. We will not get over it. We'll not get over it until we've figured out what happened and figured out a way to prevent it from happening again. This is where we say goodbye. We make way for the big A inside of a Sunday sunshine. Thanks to my broadcast assistant, Kayan Cole, telephone operator, Simone Brown Keys. To all of you who called, to my very special guest, Professor Obati Shaka and his lovely wife, Pamela T. Shaka. Also to Feroze Manji, who we weren't able to get back to, but to all those who participated in the program, to Tyrone Napier. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.
Hide nothing from the masses of the people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, failures. Claim no easy victory. When we lose our African connection, we lose our royal connection. When we disconnect ourselves from Africa, we cease to be a world people. Without the African connection, we are a disjointed people, begging for the entry into somebody else's house.
Only trod upon creation with your bloody meditation on the set of vampires, on the fight against awfulness, on the fight against creation, on the fight against everything good for the younger generation, on the old vampires, on the wickedness at midnight, and on the humble when it's daylight, on the set of vampires, on the old.
Until next week, walk good, tell the other one howdy.
Blood running, make sure you know it's fire burning.
My name is Kabu Ma'atkeru. Remember now to sign the petition. Sign the petition. Go to my Facebook page, Running African, the Iriefm Forum, or go to Kabu Ma'atkeru Williams. Sign the petition. When you have signed it, send it to somebody else and ask them to sign the petition. There's a way to take action, and then there's a way to take action. Let us take action.
fight again.